Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 in a series of videos for Time Stories. Now in this video I'm actually going to show you how to play the game itself. Now the trick here is Time Stories is a very story-driven, very thematic game, and half of the fun is discovering all the mysteries and everything that's going on with the game. So teaching this game is going to be a little bit difficult because whatever I'm going to be teaching is going to be a little bit of a spoiler. So in an effort to avoid any spoilers at all, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to show things that every single person is going to see every single time they play the game, which is going to be the entry space and also the day room, because every time you start the game it's going to be the day room. No big surprises right there, especially if you read this card. One of these two cards right here is going to tell you that anyways. And also on top of that, what I did is I did a whole bunch of little printouts on some 3x5s to give you some examples of exactly how the game plays. Now of course these are pretty horrible quality because all they are 3x5 printouts, but I did that to avoid any spoilers so I can show you how to play the game without ruining any of the surprises the game itself may have. Now, Time Stories is a story-driven game, but half the mechanic for the game is that there's a time pressure going on, no pun intended for Time Stories. But basically the players are trying to solve a mystery before they completely run out of time. If they run out of time, basically everything resets, they travel back into the future, and their boss, Bob, basically yells at them a little bit and says, do better this time, otherwise we're going to run out of funds, we're not going to be able to solve this mystery. See, in Time Stories, the players are all time travelers being sent back in the past, but they're not physically being sent back. Only their minds are being sent back, and they're sent back to occupy these bodies, which they're going to control to help solve these mysteries and figure out exactly what is going on through these various timelines, these alternate timelines, and these alternate histories. So as players try to solve these mysteries, they're trying to get to the bottom of things, but again, like I said, they only have a certain amount of time to do it. If they can't survive and figure out exactly what the mystery is before time runs out, they're sent back into the future. But the nice thing about when they're sent back in the future is anytime they run into any cards that have a symbol on it that looks like this symbol right here, except that symbol is in blue, and that'll be a very small icon on any of the cards, but any of the cards that have that symbol on that are going to stay in play, and those cards are going to give them extra secrets, extra resources, and allow them to help them solve the mystery, possibly better the second time they run through it. Not only that, you also have the prior knowledge that you have in case you went down any wild goose chases, any red herrings ran to any corridors, sections, or rooms where you figured out that was a total wild goose chase and not a direction you should have traveled. So you do get to keep that knowledge on top of all the symbols. And again, it'll look like this blue symbol right here, and it'll be very small on every single one of the cards. And also, not only that, as you're playing the game, players are going to be either getting cards that are going to say, flip over the mission successful, which means you've successfully completed the mission, and if you find this card before you run out of time, you've completed the scenario. Or if you completely run out of time before you solve this scenario, you're going to look at the mission failed time unit card, or there may be additional cards that are going to go out there for additional failed time units, and then give you instructions on when those cards appear. Or there may be alternate failure conditions. Again, those are going to tell you when you're going to reveal those cards. You never look at these cards until the game tells you to, but the game is very specific on when you should be looking at those. This is mission successful. This is run out of time. I need to reset and start everything all over again. And it gives you instructions on exactly what you need to do. Now, all these cards are going to be placed on the board, and there's a special spot on the board, right here on the board. And one other very important thing is every single one of these cards on the lower left-hand corner is going to have a number on it, from 1 up to however many cards there may be in the game. So there's 140 cards at specific scenarios, be numbered 1 to 140. So every time you reset the game, you're going to organize all the cards in order from 1 all the way up to whatever they may be. You can see that this card right here, the very first card we're going to put in play, this base card right here is number 1, all the way over here to number 7. And also, as we lay these cards out on the panorama, you're going to see these are all lettered with letters on them, and that's going to tell you exactly which card is going to go in that location. So each location card, so since we're at the base location, the base is going to go here. If we happen to be in the day room card would go right here, and you're going to see it's going to list how many cards are at that location. We have cards A, B, C, D, E, and F, and each one of those cards will be laid out on that specific location for that, and it's going to create a panorama, which could lead to some clues and give you some ideas of exactly what's going on for that scenario. So what we need to do is we need to put all these cards in our special locations. The D card goes on D, E goes on E, all the way up to however many cards there may be. Now some locations may only go up to C, some may go up to D, some may all the way go up to H, but that's going to be specific to that specific location. Another thing to understand is that when we're not in the specific scenario itself, and we'll know we're in the scenario by reading these cards, but until we're in the specific scenario, we don't actually spend time units at all, and we actually don't even know how many time units we happen to have. So the game will tell you when to start the counter, so we don't spend time units when we're exploring these locations, but once we start entering the scenario itself, that's when we have to start worrying about time. Now, at the start of every single scenario, we need to make sure we lay out all the base cards in a specific order right here. And the first person, the time captain, and the time captain is the person who controls the time die, which can add a little bit of variety on how much time we happen to be spending, so it can also add a little bit more time pressure to us. But at the start of the game, every single player, in alternating order is usually the best way to do it, is going to start reading these cards one by one, and it's going to start giving us a little bit of background, a little bit of story, and tell us exactly what exactly is going on with a specific scenario, what exactly we're looking for. The important thing to understand is that some of these cards are going to give us some actual mechanics and tell us exactly how this specific scenario is going to be played out. Because remember, there's different scenarios. We have a scenario during the 1980s where we're dealing with some kind of special incident where we need to save a girl to save the entire world. We also have a situation such as this 1920s asylum scenario where we're going back in time, our minds are going back in time and taking possession of these people who are inmates in an insane asylum. So it's going to tell us exactly what our statistics do and how we use those statistics, and we need to use those statistics, interact with various things such as combat, such as trying to talk our way out of situations, and that's all going to be dealt with by using these special dice right here that we're going to use to roll for encounters. Now, important thing to remember is nothing can ever let you roll more than 6 dice, so conveniently there's only 6 dice in the game, but if you have a whole bunch of modifiers and bonuses, you can never get more than 6 dice into play by using those bonuses and modifiers. Just a very important thing to remember about the game. Another card is also going to tell us exactly how we're going to be dealing with this scenario and exactly what kind of time units and how much pressure we're going to have when we're playing this specific scenario. So in this very specific scenario, this is the asylum scenario, the very basic scenario that comes with the basic game. We're going to see that we start this game that we need to place the items on the items location. The next thing it's going to tell us is that we all need to take 4 cards for the plan and place them basically in the map location. Now this section up here is going to be our map, and it's going to basically tell us exactly how we're going to be interacting with the world. And it's basically a map of the situation, exactly what we happen to be dealing with a specific scenario. Now again, this is an asylum scenario, so we happen to be dealing with an asylum. If we happen to be doing the Marcy case, we're actually dealing with a small town. And I don't want to give any more spoilers and tell you about any of the other cases, but basically that's going to be a map, and we're going to see at the very beginning of the game, these are the only locations we know about on the map. Now the interesting thing about the item cards is they're not always item cards. They may be helpers, they may be items, they may be clues of things we need to find, but they also may be additional map pieces. And also we have to be very careful with those map pieces because they're the ones who are most known to have this little symbol on it. Remember I told you about that small symbol? Well, that small symbol happens to be on that card. That map piece is going to stay when we reset the scenario in case we happen to fail the scenario. So I'm not going to pull any of those out because again I want to avoid spoilers here, but just know that if we get a map piece and it has that little symbol, that map piece is going to stay on additional future runs. But at the very beginning of the game, and the scenario does tell us, we're going to start in the day room, and the only thing we know about in this scenario so far is that we have a day room, we have a promenade, or promenade, however you wish to pronounce it, a dormitory, an infirmary, and we have a kitchen. Those are the only locations we can visit. But as we start revealing these item cards, they may give us additional locations that we can go out there and visit. And we simply take those locations and we'll place them exactly down right on top of that specific location. And it may give us an additional location that we can visit by going out there and examining that location, such as, totally non-spoiler, the Ninja Den. I picked that because it's not involved, and again, I'm trying to 100% avoid spoilers. So, very big spoiler here for this scenario, and I apologize for this big scenario, but there are no ninjas involved in this scenario. I hope you all are not disappointed. Anyways, the next thing it's going to tell you to do is going to tell you exactly how many time units you get for this specific scenario. Now, the asylum is a very tight scenario. It doesn't give you much time or room for error. So if you have 4 players, you have 25 time units. If you're only playing with 3 players, you only have 30 time units. And again, like I said in the introduction for this game, it is listed as a 2 to 4 player game. Technically, this is really a 3 to 4 player game. If you want to play for 2 players, it does tell you that each player controls 2 vessels apiece, which would technically make it a 4-player game, meaning you still get 25 time units. And I guess you could technically use that little bit of a band-aid to play this game as a solo game, although it doesn't make the game quite as much fun as it is, because half of the fun of this game is trying to convey clues to the other players without verbally reading these cards verbatim. So that's kind of the trick of the game, and you'll understand how that works in just a moment. But technically, if you really want to, you could play this game solo, which means you can control 3 or 4 vessels and play that game either the way you control 4 vessels and have 25 time units, or you can control 3 vessels and have 30 time units. That would be entirely up to you. After we've figured out exactly how the map is going to be laid out and we figured out how many time units we're going to get, we're going to place the mission cards on the location, and then we're going to open up the final location, which is going to Instruct the players to each pick a vessel that they're going to occupy in this specific scenario, and they're also going to take one of these tokens right here, which is going to be the token they're going to use to explore these various different locations. And they're also going to have the same matching smaller token, which would be very important if you ever die, because if you ever die, you're not completely out of the game permanently. That specific player basically just loses 7 time units where they're going to be out of the scenario until the time dial manages to catch up to them and bring them back into that specific scenario. So all their players pick out whichever vessels they want, then they're then going to take however many life points they should have that's specific to that exact vessel, and it's going to be listed on every single one of these vessels. This person has 1 life, this person has 3 lives, and this person has 2. Of course, this specific scenario has 8 different vessels you can occupy. Some of those scenarios may have more, some of them may have less, such as the Marcy case, which only has 4 vessels to occupy. Once that's all done, once all the basic setup is done for the game and we have the very basic scenario ready for the players to start, we just need to clear out the very first location, the base location, and we're all going to go as a group to the same location together. And that's the very important thing to understand about time stories, is players cannot go exploring different locations just however they want. All the players as a group must always go to the same location together, and they're all going to interact with that location together as a group. If the players want to leave, they need to agree to leave as a group, or they need to agree to stay as a group. If there's any discrepancies, the person who is the current time captain is the one who makes the final decision on what the party is going to do. So we do know from reading the base cards that we are, as a group, we're all going to start in the day room. So we put our location token, which is a white token, no stickers on either side of it. We place that in the day room, and then we simply grab the day room location. The top card is going to be handed to the time captain, who is going to flip it over and read this card to the group. And that's the only card that's going to be flipped over and ever read verbatim to the entire group. So every single location has a cover card which has the name of the location, how many cards are associated with that location. That's the only card that is always going to be read by the current time captain. And he's going to read it to all the players while you pick somebody else who's going to lay out all the rest of the cards. They're going to form kind of a panorama, which is going to be very, very important here, because this is the immediate part where we're going to start getting clues as players, and we're going to start trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do to get to the bottom of this mystery. Now there's going to be clues on what's read by the time captain, and there's going to be clues in these images. The players must figure out exactly what they want to do and how they want to start interacting with this location. It's very important to understand about this game, because controlling the time units is one of the biggest mistakes players make when they're first learning how to play time stories. But the important thing to understand is, as soon as we leave the base and we go to the very first location on the map, we have not spent any time units yet. So since this is an example 4-player game, we know that from the base we have 25 time units to try to solve this mystery. So the players need to take each one of their little pawns, which each represents their character. So this person right here happens to be the green pawn. This person right here happens to be the blue. This one happens to be the pink, and this one happens to be the orange pawns. So each one of these players controls their specific pawns. And they're going to place their pawns in one of these squares up here, which is going to allow them to look at that specific location. Now again, we have not spent any time units at all, and that's a very important thing to understand. And it's also important to understand that players can visit the same location, so each of these players both get to look at that card, or players can decide that they want to visit different locations because each person sees something on those cards that they think might be interesting. It might be a clue, and it might give them an idea of exactly what they want to do. Now, to avoid spoilers, I'm not going to flip over any of these cards because I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but just understand that once all the players have put their pawns on the specific locations, at that point the player who controls that pawn is the only person who can look at that card. So if orange and blue both place their pawns here, both these players get to look at this card. But if we had a situation like this, only the orange player can read this card, only the blue player can read this card, only the green player can read this card, and finally only the pink player can read this card. Nobody gets to look at this card because nobody's placed their pawn on that specific location. At this point, every single player is going to pick up the card based on whichever location they put their pawn at. Then every single player is going to pick up that card, and there's going to be some text on it generally. There's generally going to be an image or something like that, and there's going to be some kind of clue that's going to be relayed to the player who gets to look at this card. The important thing is only the player who has a pawn there gets to look at that card. Now they can tell all the other players about the card, they can discuss the card, but they're forbidden to read it verbatim. So there happens to be a wall of text or anything like that, you cannot read that text verbatim to the other players unless the text happens to be in a square box. Because if the text is in a square box, it's actually a rule that you can read out loud so all the players understand how to use that rule for whatever's going to occur with that specific rule for the game. So for example, this card right here has something on it, and it's going to tell the player who went to this location to do something, whether it happens to be telling you to have a combat, whether it's telling you to go ahead and grab an item out of the item deck, or whatever it's telling you to do. That player only is going to do exactly what it tells you to do, and they're going to experience that card. And again, notice we have not spent any time units at all. This player is going to do the same. They're going to pick up this card and read it. This player does the same, and this player does the same. And again, no time units have been spent at all. We still have the 25 time units we start with right now. Now all the players need to make a decision. Now all the players can decide that they want to do one of three things. They can interact with the card if it happens to have a skill test on it. And you know it has a skill test on it because I'll have one of these symbols down on the card telling you to use one of these symbols and make a skill test. Now if you want to make a skill test, it's going to cost you 1 time unit. And it costs you that time unit for the entire group of players. Time units are not tracked individually, they're tracked by the entire group. So if it happens to be a skill test and any one of the players wants to make that skill test, and they can only make that skill test if they're at that location, they will have to spend a time unit to do so. Another thing a player can do for 1 time unit, and again, if you do the time unit, that means it's going to be spent for the entire party. Another player can decide that they want to move to another location on the panorama to go ahead and explore and examine that card. Moving to another location is going to use 1 time unit. But here's the very important thing to understand. You're only using 1 time unit for all this. So this person, let's say they had to make a skill test. Let's say this person wanted to move over and explore this card. And let's say this person wanted to come over to this location because this person saw a really important clue that I think more than one person can see. Even though we've done multiple actions, that's all going to be 1 single time unit, because for that 1 single time unit, everybody gets to do 1 action. And it's one of these 3 actions. The first action you can do is you can interact by making a skill test. The second thing is you can move to another card, or you can decide to do nothing. All that for 1 time unit, but every player needs to decide to do 1 of those 3 things. Alternately, if you like, if all the players decide that they do not want to spend a time unit because they do not want to perform any skill tests, or if there's no skill test requirements, or they decide that they don't want to visit any one of the other panoramas, the players as a group can decide that they want to leave this location and move to any one of the other locations that are available on the map. Anytime the players decide that they want to move on the map, they actually have to roll the time die to decide exactly how many time units that movement's going to cost them. And the time die is going to be anywhere from 1 to 3 time units, and they spend those time units after they decide to move, and they have to agree to move as a group. If one person wants to stay and the time captain agrees with that person, those people are going to stay at that current location. So everybody needs to make an agreement or become in agreement as a group that they want to go to a new location. And then the time captain is going to roll the die. That's going to be how many time units it's going to cost them to move to that new location. We simply take our pawn, move to whatever new location we decide that we want to go to, and then we're going to find that stack of cards, for example, the dormitory in this stack of cards, and we're going to lay it out just like we did here in this panorama. And again, we're going to visit locations. Let's assume, because again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, so I'm not going to actually pull out the dormitory for you. But let's say the dormitory only had 3 locations like this. We would move to the new location. Everybody would place their pawns with whichever locations they want to interact with. They're then going to look at their individual cards, and again, we have not spent any extra time units besides the time units. It costs us to move to that location. That's very, very important. So the players look at the new cards at the new location, and again, if they have any skill tests at the new location, or if they want to move and explore additional locations, or if they want to do nothing, that's when they would decide to spend any time units at that new location. You do have to be very, very careful though when you're moving locations, because some of the locations will have their name placed in red. Now if the text on a location is ever red, it doesn't cost you anything extra to move to that location. So if I move from the dormitory to the mentioned ninja den, I'd still have to roll the dice and figure out exactly how many time units it would cost me to move to that location. And just for future reference, there's only one side that has 3 time units. I'm sure you just see me roll that 3 times, so what's the chances of that? But let's go on. Anyways, if you want to move to a red location, no extra time units, but anytime you want to leave a red location, it's going to cost you 2 time units plus a roll of the die. So if I want to move from the ninja den all the way to the dormitory and I rolled this 3, it would actually cost me 5 time units to make that movement. That is the basic gameplay for Time Stories, but there's a little bit of complexity that we need to add into the game based on some special symbols that we may see while we're playing the game. Now anytime we reveal a card that has any of these symbols, they're going to have some various effects on the gameplay. For example, if this symbol happened to be on the back of this card right here, that means that nobody can go to this location until something tells us that we can do it. Whether it's another card in one of these other locations that's going to do it, or an item that we may happen to have in our possession, that's the only time we could ever go to this card if this symbol happens to be on this card right here. The next symbol we're going to see is this little exclamation point, which means that every time we move to this location, the very first time we explore this location, possibly as a new location, we have to place somebody at that location. It's mandatory. Everybody else can fan out as much as they want, or multiple players can go to that location, but it's still a requirement that at least one of the vessels has to visit this location when we explore this location. The final symbol we may see is one that looks like a trash can that may be on the back of a card. If this symbol is on the back of a card, that means that we can explore the locations as we wish, but if at least one person doesn't place their pawn at that location, that card, let's say this trash can happened to be on the back of this card, if at least one of us does not go to this location, this card is going to be removed from the game and we may lose very, very vital information. Or it could be a red herring, we don't know, but it's very, very important that we watch out for these symbols because they're going to affect exactly how we're going to explore the various locations. Now there could be some additional symbols that we need to watch out for, to be careful of. If we ever see four of these, the 4 symbol right here that shows all 4 of these, that means as many tokens as we have in play, as many pawns as we have in play, all the players need to go to that location. So if we're playing a 3-player game, all 3 pawns need to go to the location explored. If we have a 4-player game, then all 4 of the pawns need to go to that location. You don't have to go there first, but if you want to figure out what's behind that card, it does require everybody to go to that location. And of course that can be mixed with some of the other symbols too. So if we see all 4 pawns plus the trash can, if all 4 of us don't go there as our first action when we reveal this location, that card is going to be removed, and again we may possibly lose some vital information. And there's also going to be some other additional symbols that may be on the back of these cards that are going to restrict when we can or cannot access these locations. For example, this single pink square means that we had to have done something that gave us that token sometime during the game, during another location, or something that we did to find this token, and this token would have been placed on the board right here, letting us know that we now have that token. But until we have that token, nobody can flip over that card. Now there's going to be 2 different ways we're going to see the symbol on the back of a card. We may explore the back of a card right here, which may tell us to make a skill test, and if we succeed in that skill test, we get to flip that card over with that symbol. Or we may have actually found the symbol at a completely different location, which now says we can flip over that card. And of course you get some variety on it. It may tell you that you have the gray and the black symbol, or it may tell you that you have to be that specific vessel to access that location, or you may even need an item plus happen to be that specific vessel. So if that specific vessel isn't even involved in the game, such as in this example, we only have this 4 vessels right here. This vessel specifically is not involved in the game, so we know that nobody in this run can ever access this location. Whether it happens to be lost information for us or not, we don't know until we do an additional run. Now, as the players go out there and explore these various locations, different things are going to happen to them as they flip over these cards. For example, you may flip over a card and we're going to see a card such as this, which is going to tell us to read some text, and then it's going to tell us to take an item. For example, this one says take item 7. So this player would go through the item deck, grab item number 7, and do exactly what item says. Whether it tells you add another map piece to the map board here, whether it tells you that you just gained a weapon or a firearm or something else, or you just got an ally, or you just unlocked a clue or a certain piece of the puzzle, you'll know by looking right at this card right here. Another type of card that you may unlock may have a combat on it, and you have to be very careful with these combat cards because they're going to have a lock symbol, and this is where you can potentially start losing lots of time units. Because remember what I said earlier, that you only spend a time unit whenever you make a skill test? Well, if there's ever a lock symbol, you're forced to stay at that location until you manage to defeat whatever that encounter happens to be. So you have to be very, very careful here. So if the green player went to this location, they would be forced to spend a time unit, they would be forced to make a skill test, and they'd be forced in this example to defeat this crazy psychopath who's trying to eat them. Now I'll explain how combat works in just a second, but I will let you know that if this player spends the time unit to go ahead and interact with the skill test, the other players can use their same time unit to move over to this location to help us, but the unfortunate thing is they can't help us on this specific time unit because they spent their time unit moving over to us, meaning the first roll I'd have to make myself, and then if I failed in defeating this encounter, I'd have to spend one more time unit as a group. Then the entire group, as a group, can try to interact with this location, try to defeat this test, and the players are going to do it one at a time, not as a group. It's very, very important to understand it's not as a group, but they're going to do it one at a time. Because if on the second round this person managed to defeat this encounter, that means these players still had a time unit in which to do something. They can change their mind, decide that they may to go out there and explore other cards that have not been explored yet. Anytime you need to make a skill test, whether it's for combat or whether it's trying to talk your way out of a certain circumstances or whatever you're trying to do, you're going to be trying to get rid of shields, which are going to bring you ever so much closer to trying to defeat whatever that encounter may be. Now the bottom of every single card is going to show you a special picture of a shield, matching any one of these pictures over here, plus how many shields that specific type are going to be at the location. And we're going to see that we have 3 different stacks of shields right here, and however many of each one of those shields happen to be. And we're going to place those shields right underneath that specific card at that specific location, letting us know exactly what we need to do to defeat it. So in this example, we see that we're going to have 2 red skulls as our first stack. Our second stack is going to be 2 of these white and gray shields. And then finally, the third stack is going to be a single heart, telling us exactly what we need to do to overcome this encounter. And the way this is going to work is we're going to look at whatever statistic we happen to be using to try to defeat this encounter, and we're going to roll that many dice, and we're going to try to get rid of these shields. Any shields we don't get rid of can potentially cause negative effects to us, or not, depending on what kind of shields they happen to be. And what we're looking for is we're looking for these star symbols, and these star symbols are going to allow us to get rid of these shields. So basically, for example, if we happen to be at this location with the orange player, and the orange player happens to be this receptacle right here, and let's say this happens to be a combat test, and we know that because it would show the combat symbol on the card, letting us know it's a combat test. So it would be testing our combat skill. In this example, we see our combat skill happens to be a 2. So we're going to roll 2 dice to try to defeat this encounter. So we'll roll the dice, and we're going to be looking for specific results. For every single star we roll, we're going to get rid of these shields in order from left to right. So if I rolled 1 single star, I'm only going to get rid of 1 shield, and that shield will be removed, and that'd be what all I've managed to accomplish for that single time unit, because you only got 1 roll per time unit. Which is why you may want some of your friends to come over there and help you, because on the next time unit expenditure, they can also help you overcome this encounter by rolling the dice, again, in order. Now what we have to be very, very careful of when we're rolling these dice is every one of these shields has a specific meaning on it, and they're going to have a specific effect as long as they're still here on the stack. So once this shield right here, since I rolled 1 star, once it was removed, it's no longer going to be something I need to worry about. I just need to worry about the shields that are still remaining. Now a red skull shield is basically something we only need to worry about if we happen to roll a red skull on the dice. So if we happen to roll a red skull on the dice, we're going to add up the total amount of red skulls that happen to be showing. So let's say if I rolled this right here, we know we have 2 red skulls, plus I happen to roll 2 red skulls on the dice. We need to compare the amount of red skulls shown to the amount of resistance for that specific receptacle. So in this example, this receptacle right here has a toughness of 2, and we see that because there's a number 2 next to the skull symbol. So what we need to do is add up how many red skulls are showing and then compare that to our toughness. If the amount of skulls showing is greater than our toughness, we're going to take 1 wound. Now it's not 1 wound per skull over, so I could have 10 skulls somehow, and I only have a toughness of 2. I'm still only going to take 1 wound, so that's all I need to worry about. Now this specific receptacle only has 2 wounds to begin with, so that means I have 1 hit point left. So if I ever lose that last one, this receptacle is going to be defeated temporarily, and I'll explain to you why it's only temporary in just a moment. But I need to just figure out exactly how much damage I'm going to take specifically for that receptacle. So after we figure out any damage that may have occurred, we're going to move on to see if there's any special shields left over still on the stack right here. Now the first special shield happens to be this heart symbol, which means that no matter what, we're going to take a point of damage no matter what our toughness is. So in this example right here, again for this receptacle right here, we know that I rolled 4 skulls, which is greater than my 2 toughness, so I would have taken a point of damage. Plus there still happens to be 1 wound token, or 1 wound shield still left on the stack over here. So I'm going to take an additional point of damage, which would be enough to take out this receptacle, because she only has 2 hit points, and that would have been 2 points of damage taking her out. Now the thing you have to be very careful about is whenever one of your receptacles dies, they're not removed from the game, you're simply going to take your token right here and put it down 7 time units away from wherever the current time unit counter happens to be. So we have to be at 12, minus 7, we're going to subtract them. That's exactly where our time unit token is going to be. Now this player does not get to interact with the game at all until a time unit catches up to them, and then they can return to the game, return their pawn to the game, and start exploring additional locations all over again. So we do have to be careful about being defeated, especially if there's less than 7 time units left in the current run, because there's less than 7 time units. You know you're going to go below the 0. You know that specific receptacle is not going to come back in the game, and that player is not going to be able to do anything for the rest of the game. So you can actually have multiple receptacles knocked out in along different time spots just by having some very, very bad luck. But if all 4 of the receptacles are ever knocked out at one time, that means it's a completely failed run. As long as there's still 1 receptacle left alive, you can still burn time units and hope your other receptacles can eventually move back into the game and continue to help exploring. But back on to the skill test. Your receptacle only needs to worry about red skulls if they happen to roll red skulls specifically for the test. So let's say, for example, this receptacle on this test only happened to roll this as our final result. We do see that there has to be 2 skulls there, and just for argument's sake, let's go ahead and add a 3rd skull to this specific encounter. So we do know that 3 skulls is greater than our toughness of 2, but since we didn't actually roll any skulls on the dice, we don't have to worry about skulls at all. We only have to worry about skulls if at least one of our dice happens to roll a skull, which does mean that if you happen to be a receptacle with a very powerful statistic who gets to roll a lot of dice, it also gives you more chances to roll skulls and more chances to actually hurt yourself. So you have a greater chance of success by rolling more dice, but you also have a greater chance of hurting yourself by rolling more dice. So you have to be very, very careful about that. So again, as I said, every single one of these stars you roll is going to allow you to remove one of these shields from the encounter, depending on however many stars you happen to roll. So if you happen to roll 3 stars, and this was an encounter that had 2 skulls, we'd take out the first 2 skulls, and then we'd also take one of these out, because remember, we're going to go from left to right, removing the shields as we go. And if there's any shields left over that have a special characteristics, such as the heart here, which means we take an automatic point of damage no matter what, we're going to resolve those. Or this shield right here, if it happens to be still remaining, it's going to cost us 1 time unit, or the black shield one, which is going to have a special result depending on the encounter. And that's going to be different for every single encounter you're going to go through. Anyways, you're going to continue making skill tests, continuing to burn time units, until you completely defeat this encounter by removing all the shields attached to this encounter. Once you've done so, this encounter is removed from the game. You don't have to worry about it until the next run, because remember, when you do another run, everything resets, which means everything you defeated comes back to life. All you keep is the knowledge you had, and possibly any cards that may have this symbol on it in the upper right hand corner, signifying to you that's a card that's going to remain for multiple runs. 2 other really important things to understand about these tests. If a test does not have a lock symbol on it, you are free to leave before the test is completed. As a matter of fact, if the players all leave the location and decide to go to another location, they come back to this test at a later date, that test is going to be completely reset. So if you happen to have some success at it earlier by knocking out some shields, but you leave before it's complete, again, assuming there's not a lock symbol, because remember, if there's a lock symbol, you're basically stuck there until you can manage to complete the test. But there's no lock symbol and you leave and come back, the test is going to be completely reset 100%. You have to go through all those shields all over again. The other thing that you need to understand is if you're at your location and all the players decide to spend a time unit because they're basically interacting with other cards for various different reasons, and if there happens to be at least 1 red skull at that location, you can't decide to do nothing and not roll any dice at all. Because remember, that is one of your options for a time unit expenditure, is to do nothing on your turn. The basic 3 options for a time unit expenditure everybody needs to decide on is to make a skill chest, move to another location, or do nothing. But if you decide to do nothing at a location that has at least 1 skull on it, you're going to take a point of damage no matter what. That's what you get for not willing to risk the roll of chance. Now, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video for time stories. I didn't want to go too deep into details because anything beyond this will get into spoiler realm. And I know this is a game that people want to enjoy. They want to enjoy the story. They want to enjoy the interaction. They want to enjoy all the surprises that Time Story can present. So my next video, I'm going to show you some gameplay from Time Story showing the asylum case itself. Now again, big warning, it's going to be full of spoilers because I'm going to be playing the full asylum case. I'm not going to go through too many rounds. I just want to do enough to give you an idea of exactly how the game plays. And I'm not going to show you cards if I can avoid it. So I'm going to keep the spoilers to a minimum, but I just want to emphasize there are going to be spoilers. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them in the YouTube comments down below. I'll make sure to get to them as best as I can. If you enjoyed this video series and you want to see more like it, click that like button, click that subscribe button. And as always, thanks for watching.